Yeah, I just finished the body.
So this week's Parsha is Parshas Terumah. It begins on page 445 in the Art Scroll Stone Chumash. So the Parsha begins. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and let them take from me a portion from every man whose heart motivates him. You shall take my portion." And then in verse 3, this is the portion that you shall take from them: gold, silver, copper, etc. And it gives a list of the materials that they would take donations for the construction of the tabernacle and its vessels. But the commentaries comment on the repetition here, that it says, "Speak, let them take from me a portion from every man whose heart motivated, take of my portion." This is the portion that says that portion three times. Hebrew is truma. It says portion three times in this pasuk, and I think it's the Gemara that says that that it's a reference to the three donations that we find that we're required to give, and that was the earlier we saw that I'm sorry, not earlier, later in Parshas Kisisa they do a census of the Jewish people, and there they take a half shekel. Everyone's required to give a half a shekel, and that ended up being used for the silver sockets that were the base and like the foundation of the Mishkan of the tabernacle building. And then there's a general mitzvah every year to give a half a shekel, which would go towards the communal offerings. And there's this mitzvah, special mitzvah here to give donations towards the construction of the Mishkan of the tabernacle. And though that's what these three portions, these three trumos, gifts, donations that are being referenced here. And the Kollel points out that two of them, it associates them with Hashem. And that is that you shall take and let them take for me a portion. That means that it's for me, for God, a portion. From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion. Once again, this is Hashem's portion. And then this is the portion that you shall take. The third one doesn't have Hashem's name associated with it. And the Kollel explains that our sages say that wherever you find Hashem's name, there you find his humbleness, like lack of arrogance. And our sages say that Hashem does not, whenever there's arrogance, Hashem doesn't associate with that. So, so he says that in the first two portions that we mentioned, that was the donation of the half shekels for the census that went towards the silver sockets, and the half shekels that were given every year for the communal offerings. So that every single person, every single Jewish male, at least man, had an equal portion in it. That they had, that every single Jewish male had to give a half a shekel. So nobody gave more, nobody gave less, and it was all used for the same thing. It all went towards the same thing, either the sockets or the foundation of the Mishkan of the tabernacle, or the yearly half shekel. It went towards the communal offerings. So everyone's money went to the same place. So there, since everyone was treated equally and everyone was giving equally, there was no place for arrogance, for lording over someone else. So there, it's associated with Hashem's name. Whereas the third donation, which is the donation here, this is the portion that you shall give the donations towards the construction of the tabernacle. So that was variable. That was someone who was feeling generous would give generously. And as it says, from every man whose heart motivates him, that means in a generous spirit. And a wealthier person could give more, and a poor person obviously could give less. So there's a person could walk away and say like, wow, look at that donation I gave. I'm doing pretty good. I gave a big one, and look, that guy only gave this little bit. I gave a lot, and a person could find themselves showing off or feeling arrogant. So that Hashem's name doesn't associate with it. The Beis Yitzchak takes a different approach. That he says that our sages say that we build the Mishkan, we build the tabernacle in the physical world, and we build the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, in the physical world. But he says that corresponds, the tabernacle and the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, correspond to a spiritual tabernacle or a spiritual the spiritual temple, and they're more than connected. They're just a physical version of the spiritual one on high. And it says the physical version is we built out of these physical materials that are being donated. But what's the spiritual version built of? And it says what the spiritual version is built of is the spirit of generosity that the donations were given. That he's saying in the physical world, it's the actions that are effective. In the physical world, it's in the physical world, the physical action has a physical effect. In the spiritual world, it's the spiritual actions that have a spiritual effect. And what's the spiritual action? It's the intention. It's that when we do something, when we do an action with intent, or even if we intend to do something, our sages say that that if a person intends to do a good deed and it just isn't able to do it for whatever reason, something prevents them from doing it, Hashem actually considers it as if an action was done, because spiritually a spiritual action is the intent and is the feeling of generosity through which it's done. So with these donations, the physical donation is what the physical structure is built of, and the generous spirit through which it's given is what the spiritual Mishkan, the spiritual tabernacle is built of. And that's what this verse is saying. So he reads it. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel, let them take for me a portion. What's that for me a portion? What's that portion for me? From every man whose heart motivates him, you shall take my portion. And my portion is the motivation of the heart. And then it continues, this is the portion that you shall take from them, gold, silver, copper. The raw materials are the physical portion that we take. Okay. So it gives these raw materials, gold, silver, copper in verse 4, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, 3 different colors of wool, linen and goat hair, red-dyed ram skins, tachash skins, acacia wood, oil for illumination, spices for the anointment oil and the aromatic incense, shoham stones, and stones for the settings for the ephod and the breastplate.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so they had the gold, silver, and copper, which they lugged around until that.
Right. They plundered the Egyptians.
And that's where
right.
So you were a good plunderer, you had more than I guess. I know that sounds but true. Okay. That's what I'm trying to figure where. And then they had to, at this point, how far after the Exodus are they?
This is just a short time. This is the 40-day. I mean, more than no. Let me. It wasn't. It was. It depends when exactly this was said. There's disagreement amongst the commentaries when exactly this was said.
Around for about a couple months.
Right. So they traveled for 49 days till they got to Mount Sinai.
Right.
They encamped at Mount Sinai, and they're still encamped there at this point. So they had traveled 49 days. They they got the 10 Commandments, and they're encamped at Mount Sinai for a long time.
Okay.
For like a year or so. And they're still encamped at this point at Mount Sinai. Okay. And just as an aside, the point you were making is that the good plunderers might have plundered more. They borrowed stuff from the Egyptians, and also when the Egyptians they were drowned at the sea, they took all their stuff because they came in their dress uniforms. They came in because they were expecting a massacre, not a fight, a celebration.
Right.
But also there were people who started off wealthier, that they were slaves, but there were wealthier slaves and less wealthy slaves. And there were people who actually were very successful in Egypt who would have started out wealthy. Okay. In verse 8, they shall make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. Here the Rabbeinu Bachya speaks out he says that this is a reference, a siman, it's a sign for what's to come in the Beis HaMikdash in the temple. And you'll notice that I think that Kleyaga points out, it doesn't say, you make me a mishkan, a tabernacle, and I'll dwell among you. It says, you'll make me a mikdash, you'll make me a sanctuary, which is usually what we'd call the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, not the tabernacle isn't usually called the mikdash, it's called the mishkan, called the tabernacle. So he says this is actually a reference to the times that the temple stood, and that the first temple stood 410 years, and the second temple stood 420 years. And he says, if you read this word in Hebrew, vishachanti, and I will add that ArtScroll translates so that I may dwell. So he says you could read it as vishachan, and I will dwell, taf yud. That is 410. That's the numerical taf yud is numerical value of 410. It's easy, 2 letters. Taf is 400 and yud is 10. And that's a reference to the first temple, which was 410 years. And he says, but if you break up the word different, you get the letters shin, nun, and yud. Those are letters sheni, which means the second one. And then you're left with taf chaf. You're left with the taf and the chaf, which is 420. And that's a reference. The second one was 420 years. So if you're ever confused or not remembering how long the temple stood, Vishachanti will give you the answer if you're able to do the math. Okay, it continues. Like everything that I show you, the form of the tabernacle and the form of all its vessels, and so shall you do. And on page 447, the stone, ArtScroll stone chumash, this is chapter 25, verse 10. They shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, 1.5 cubits its height. It's covered with 4 gold. You shall cover it with pure gold from within and from without. Shall you cover it? So it's covered with gold on the outside and covered with gold on the inside. And you shall make it in a gold crown all around, and you shall cast for it 4 rings of gold and place them on its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side, 2 rings on the second side. You shall make staves of acacia wood, that's poles, wooden poles, cover them with gold, and insert the staves into the rings on the side of the ark from which to carry the ark. The staves shall remain on the rings of the ark, they may not be removed from it. You shall place in the ark the testimonial tablets that I shall give you, the luchos, the tablets, with the 10 commandments were placed in the ark. And our sages say that tells us the function of the ark. It was carried, the ark carried the tablets with the 10 commandments, and the ark represents the Torah. And and as it contains the 10 commandments, it represents the Torah as, given to us directly by Hashem. And he says, and our sages interpret the ark based on this, that it represents the Torah, that first of all, that it says it's 2.5 cubits its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. Those are all broken measurements. None of them are a whole number. They all have a half in the measurements. And the Klayaka says this is to tell us that when a person measures themselves spiritually and measures themselves with their Torah knowledge, they should always recognize and realize that there's something missing. A person should never look at himself in any area of Torah and say that, yeah, I got that. I really know that there's always something missing. Yeah, okay. And additionally, that it says that it's covered with pure gold from within, from without. Our sages say that it was actually like a wooden box made out of acacia wood, and there was like a golden box that fit on the inside and a golden box that fit on the outside. So it was covered on both sides with gold. It wasn't like plated in that sense. It was actually like a box inside and outside. And the Klayaka says this either represents the revealed Torah is the gold on the outside, and the hidden Torah, the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah, is the gold on the inside. Or he wants to say that it represents the outside is the external of a Torah scholar, and the inside is the inside of a Torah scholar. And it's telling us that it's not enough just to be on the inside to be a Torah scholar, that a Torah scholar has to be dignified and represent the Torah, and even externally should represent the Torah in a dignified way and not be what we call in Yiddish a schlump, not be a mess on the outside. And the opposite is also true, that to be that if a Torah scholar is just gold on the outside, but on the inside it's lacking, that's also very they're very lacking. That we have to be, the inside and the outside should match. Okay, and it says that that there's these staves, these poles are put into the rings, and it says in verse 15, I'm sorry, the staves shall remain in the rings of the ark; they may not be removed from it. And this is the only one of the vessels of the tabernacle that it says that there are others that have staves in there because they were they were carried. The whole Mishkan, the whole tabernacle was made to be portable. They carried it from one encampment to the next. But this is only one that the staves are never to be, the handles kind of are never to be removed. And Rav Shamshon Rafal Hirsch explains that the staves, that it's to tell us that the Torah has to be portable, that we can't carry everything with us. We can't carry the service with us, that the offerings are limited to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, or to the temple. We haven't had these offerings for thousands of years. But the Torah is what we do have. And even after the temple was destroyed, or we don't have the Mishkan, we don't have the tabernacle, but the Torah is always portable, and it's something that we take with us wherever we go. Everywhere the Jews end up, we bring the Torah with us. Okay, okay, then there's a cover with the kruvim, with the trubim on top, and they just say it's made out of one solid piece of gold with the whole top and the cherubs hammered out of that one piece of gold. Okay, and that would cover the ark. And then on page 449, verse 23, you have the table of showbread. In the Art Scroll Stone Chumash, you should have a diagram of kind of what it would look like. It says in verse 23, once again on page 449, you shall make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits its length, a cubit its width, and a cubit and a half its height. So here you notice that instead of all being broken measurements, you have 2 whole numbers and 1/2 in the dimension. And the Kleoka says that's because this table of showbread, it was a table that had rows of bread on top of it, represents it's the Kesher Malchus, it's the crown of royalty. But this is our sages call this the Shulchan Shalmaila. It's the heavenly table through which we all eat from. That Hashem sends us our parnasa, our livelihood, through this. This is the.
Why is it called show bread? It's just there for show. No.
It's a good question. That the Hebrew is lechem hapanim, which literally means the bread of faces, and that's because of it has like facets. If you see a picture of what it would look like, it was like baked like that. Yeah, I don't know why it's called showbread though, but I don't know why. But that's not a literal translation, unless I'll see if Rashi says anything on that. But I saw the Ramban does it well. Right, it doesn't. It was like baked in a very special shape.
Baked on Friday, put on the table on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So the Kohanim were eating like wheat bread.
And our sages say that was one of the miracles of the temple, is that the bread never went stale. Oh. That it was sitting on but it was there all week. And they actually, and as it says, where is that? On verse 30, they're skipping a little bit, page 451, verse 30, on the table shall you place showbread before me always. That there always has to be bread on there. And when they'd remove one set of bread, they'd remove it by pushing the new bread on, and that would slide the old bread off. And I'll get into that in a minute, actually. But first, I want to. Yeah.
Since we don't have temple,
yeah,
we don't have this kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
Is there something that substitutes for
yes, that's a very good question. And that's our table in our own home.
Okay.
Is that if we keep our table sacred by being careful about what we talk about at the table. We say Torah thoughts at the table. We talk about the Parsha, say Torah thoughts, and we say brachas at the table, and we bench at the table. We praise Hashem at the table. So then our table is the replacement for the table, and that's the medium, the channel through which Hashem sends us our material blessing. And the Zohar says for that reason, the custom is not to, the Zohar says that we don't clear all the bread off the table when we bench. That we should leave whatever crumbs or whatever, we should leave the bread on the table while we bench instead of clearing it away, the same way that the showbread had to always be on the table in the tabernacle and in the temple. And that was, once again, it had to be there because the Ramban says that Hashem created the world something from nothing. In the first moment of creation, there was nothing, and Hashem created something from nothing. I think they call it ex nihilo in Latin, or ex nihilo. My Latin isn't great, but something from nothing. After that initial moment of creation, so everything Hashem created was from that. There was nothing created, nothing was created as something from nothing after the first moment of creation. So when Hashem sends us a blessing, it comes from something that's already in existence. Hashem sends us our parnas, our livelihood. There's the bread there already, and that's the channel through which we receive our bread. And that's why when we bench, which is we're bringing blessing on our table by benching, by praising Hashem at our table. So we have bread there, and that's like the channel to which Hashem sends us our blessing. But that's a good question. And what about the measurements? The dimensions are two whole numbers and 1/2. And so the Kollel says that's because a person should, when it comes to material blessing and the material physical needs, a person should be happy with what they have, and they should view themselves as being complete. But there's one of the dimensions is a half measure to say that we shouldn't fill ourselves till we're completely full. We should leave a little bit empty in our satisfying our physical desires, that we should leave something unfulfilled. And doctors would tell you 100% the same thing about eating, is that eating too much could be very damaging, especially if you have acid reflux. But okay, fine. Okay, and it says here again, in verse 25, it says, you shall make for it a molding of 1 hand's breadth all around. You shall make a gold crown on the molding all around. There's like a gold crown on the table of showbread. There was a gold crown on the Ark of the Covenant, and not in this week's Parsha, but in next week's Parsha, Tetzaveh, there's a gold crown on the golden altar, the altar for the incense. And our sages say these crowns represent the 3 crowns that the 3 crowns that are mentioned in Pirkei Avos, actually, is there's the crown of the kahuna of the Kohen, and that's represented by the altar of incense. There's the crown of the king, of the crown of the king of kingship, which is represented by the table, which is our physical needs. And then there's the crown of the Torah, which is by the Ark of the Covenant. So the Kollel points out that by all of those crowns, it says, by the Ketorah, the incense altar, and by the table, it says, you singular shall make a crown of, you singular shall make a crown. But by the Ark of the Covenant, which represents the Torah, it says the you is a plural you. That is, you plural shall make a crown. And in Hebrew, you have a different word for you if it's plural than singular, kind of like in the South, where you have y'all and all y'all.
Right.
So in Hebrew, it's ve'asu instead of asisa. Let me just find it here. That's someone commenting on this. Okay. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong spot. Okay. Oh, it's in verse 11 on page 447. You shall make on it a gold crown all around. So there the Hebrew is ve'asisa alav. Yeah, and you shall make on it. So it's instead of over here, what does it say? 25, hey. That's interesting, actually. It says vasisa. But in the building of the ark itself, in verse 10, it says ve'asu aron, and you, plural, shall make the aron, the ark, whereas, let's say, in the table, it says, verse 23, it's vasisa, and you, singular, will make the table. It's because the ark, the crown of the Torah, is something that anyone could aspire to. Anyone could aspire to study Torah and become a great Torah scholar, whereas only a Kohen could be a Kohen, and the king has to come from the family of, from the tribe of Yehuda, specifically from the family of King David. Okay. Next, we have the menorah on page 451, verse 31. You shall make a menorah of pure gold, hammered out shall the menorah be, and 6 branches shall emerge from its sides, 3 branches of the menorah from one side, 3 branches of the menorah from the second side, and it details how it's built. Our sages say that it was to be also hammered out of a single block of gold. The entire menorah was to be made. And here our sages say that the menorah also, it's slightly different than the Aaron, the ark, represents the Torah. The menorah represents the light of the Torah, which is the Torah spreading forth, being taught throughout the world. And so they say there's 6 branches and 1 central branch. Our sages say the 6 branches represent the 6 sections of the Mishnah, and the central branch represents the fear of God, which is what everything, all Torah teaching has to be based on. That the spreading of the Torah has to be based on fear of God, and then you deal with the branches, which are the 6 sections of the Mishnah, and also that it's built out of 1 block of gold, that it's hammered out of 1 block of gold, is also to bring forth this idea that the Torah, even though there are all different areas of Torah study and all different kinds of messages going on, you have, the written Torah, you have the halacha, you have the medrash, and you have the Kabbalah, but it's all comes from one source. And that's what this being from 1 block of gold symbolizes. Okay, and next comes the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. You have, first of all, you have curtains made out of, you have really tapestries made out of multiple materials. First, you have one that's woven out of many different materials that each like yarn, each strand is made out of spun multiple materials. And then you have in verse 7 on page 455, curtains of goat hair. And then where am I? Did I miss one? Yeah, and then on top of that, in verse 14, you shall make a cover for the tent of red dyed ram skin and a cover of tachash skin above.
It's a lot of curtains.
A lot, right? It's a lot of curtains. So the first curtain, which was all those multiple strands woven together, was what you saw from the inside, because that was the first layer. So if you were on the inside looking up, so that's what you would see. That was the ceiling. On top of that, you have the goat skin, which isn't very pretty, but that was to protect that. That would
be above that.
Right, that would be above that, and that would protect that. And on top of that, you have the red dyed ram skin and the tacha skin, which would be like what you'd see from the outside.
Okay. It's funny because when I think of a curtain, I think of something vertical, not horizontal.
Right. Well, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, well, so we'll see. We're going to go very quickly through the actual construction, but it was made out of wooden planks that were upward. Right. So they were wooden planks lined up next to each other upward.
Right.
And so that had this curtain going over it to the side. So right, so it was just like a cover. It's almost like a tent, except it was flat on top. Okay, and then in verse 15, you shall make the planks of the tabernacle, as we were saying, of acacia wood standing erect upwards. 10 cubits the length of each plank, a cubit and a half the width of each plank. Each plank should have 2 tenons. That means like it has 2 fingers going down, 2 protrusions going down from the bottom of each plank. Parallel to one another, so shall you do for all the planks of the tabernacle. And you'll see on page 457, they have a picture of what that would look like. And you can see how it was built, that they would put these planks next to each other. And they don't show that in this picture, but they had silver sockets that each of these tenons would be put into. And then on the top, right, on the top, they have these indentations, and they would put a square ring, if such a thing makes sense. But you can see the picture. They would put a square that joins together the two, and then they would also have poles going in front, going along the sides through rings on the planks holding them together. And there was one pole that went down the middle through a hole that was drilled through all the planks. So you can see that picture on page 457 in the ArtScroll Stone Comment. Okay, then in page 459. Verse 31, you shall make a partition of turquoise, purple, scarlet wool, linen, twisted, weaver's craft. And that was a curtain that they'd put as a separation between the holy and the Holy of Holies within the building. And there was also a screen for the entrance of the structure, entrance of the tent. And so this is all the building that was. This is all the building. Then you had the courtyard, which was in front of the building, and then you had a screen. You had more tapestries all around, and that was actually vertical tapestries all around. So, and that's what's in verse 27. You have the altar. You shall make the altar. I'm sorry, chapter 27 on page 459. You shall make the altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits in length, 5 cubits in width. The altar shall be square, and 3 cubits its height. And our sages say that this 3 cubits was actually above a certain point, and it was actually 10 cubits high. That there were 7 cubits. They had, it's called a mavarta. They had a kind of a walkway on the outside, and then you had another 3, so it was a total of 10. You shall make horns on its 4 corners. From it shall its horns be. You shall cover it with copper. So if you see these, you can see on page 461 a picture of what those horns look like. You shall make its pots to clear its ashes, etc., etc. In verse 5, you shall place it under the surrounding. On verse 4 on page 461. You shall make for it a netting of copper meshwork and make upon the meshwork 4 copper rings at its 4 edges. So its staves shall be brought into its rings, and the staves shall be on the side of the altar when it's carried. Hollow of wood shall make it as you were shown in the mountain. So they shall do. And so it was made out of wood covered in copper, and it was actually filled with earth when they would be stepped. So and then we have the courtyard, like we said. You had that structure which was made out of those upright beams covered in the tapestries, and that's where the menorah, the table of showbread, and and that was in the Holy, and the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant. Then you had this courtyard, and that's where this altar, the copper altar, was. And how should it be made? In verse 9, you shall make the courtyard of the tabernacle on the south side, the lace hangings of the courtyard of twisted linen, and it gives the dimensions. And then there are pillars with sockets and hooks on the pillars and bands of silver. And they would mount these tapestries, which were upright, and they were the walls of the courtyard, were hung by ropes attached to these hooks on the pillars. And you can see a picture of that on page 463. So on page 463, you could see you had the tapestries, which are mount hanging from pillars around. You have the copper altar with a ramp going up in the courtyard, and then you have the structure on the west side.
The access ramp is what, from Cohen up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was.
Who went inside the tabernacle?
So every morning, Kohanim would go they would do incense on the.
Clean out the ashes.
Right, yeah, they would clean out the ashes the day before. They would light incense on the.
Those pedestals, uprights, very narrow. I mean, I know it's drawing. It just doesn't look like a person could fit in there.
Oh yeah. This is, once again, it was very big. This is I don't even know if it's a scale drawing. I don't know how they.
But nothing else was inside the tabernacle. It's not like.
So inside the tabernacle, the tabernacle is what we call the structure inside in there.
Right.
So it have the menorah, the table of showbread, and the gold and the incense altar, which is much smaller than the one outside.
You got those 3 holes there.
Right, and that's
like you can't fit anything.
Right. But it was big.
Okay.
And and you had the Ark of the Covenant all the way on the western side, which was separated by curtains from there. Okay, and actually, if you look in see if I can find it. It gives the dimensions here. Planks, 20 planks for the south side. So there are 20 planks on the south side, with south and north would be the long ones. And each plank were a cubit and a half. So the cubit and a half times 20 is 30 cubits, which is about 60 feet, a little less than 60 feet, I think we all. And so it's about 60 feet long. And where am I? To make 6 planks, so it's 6 planks wide, which would be 9 wide. So 9 cubits, which is about, like we said, about 16 feet or so.
Now this, Scott's gonna be 36 on Saturday.
Right.
So he had Shkolim. He couldn't have had Rosh Chodesh. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, Terumah could be Shkolim and Rosh Chodesh.
There were three.
Right.
Rabbi Gordon had to learn it to teach him because, it was like such a coincidence. It hadn't happened prior.
Right. It's not usual. It's not uncommon that we have three, but it's not especially common.
Right.
Okay, shkoyach. Anyway, everybody have a great Shabbos.
Yep.
And yeah.